Hello, everyone. We're back with another episode of the Intuitive Revolution in Business. And today I have the pleasure of having with me Louise O Reilly, an inclusion and diversity coach. So, Louise, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you. I've been working a little bit with Louise to look at how my business can be more inclusive and diverse. And this is something I feel very, very passionate about, but I'm sure I don't feel as passionate about it as Louise does. So Louise, first tell us a little bit about your business and how long have you been doing what you're doing? And a bit about yourself as well. I think that's a really big, big part of what you do, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. I am so excited to be here talking with you and your listeners or viewers. Would you mind if I do an acknowledgement of country?
No, go ahead, please, please, please.
Beautiful,
But maybe
beautiful.
explain what it is, because I think outside of Australia, it's a little bit maybe not as usual, although I wouldn't know. But I know that in the UK, nobody would know what it is. So
Yes, absolutely. So, acknowledgement of country is a way of acknowledging the custodians of those particular lands that you're on, really acknowledging that there are certain people who have certain birth roles to care for those particular lands, and they are the First Nations people of all those different lands. It's their responsibility to care for the ecosystems, so make sure it's thriving in those places. They are the land caretakers. They are the ones who look after the spirit of the land and the physical part of the land to make sure the land's thriving, and therefore that land can support us all as humans on this planet as well. So in Australia, this is something that in my Aboriginal culture, it's something that we customarily do, and it's becoming more and more common in the Western culture of Australia to do it as well. And it's a beautiful way of respecting that particular role of those people and those custodians. So I, Louise O Reilly of the Warrawa Noongar people, would like to acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional and ongoing custodians of the lands and waters on which I am on, my family is on, where we thrive, my business is on, and we create beautiful memories in this place. So I thank them for that custodial role that they play here. I also like to pay respects to the elders of this space and thank them for their community leadership, their guidance, their love, and for the wisdom that they provide and give lovingly into the community, because they are our wisdom holders. I would also like to extend that acknowledgement out to all your listeners, the custodians and the places in which they are on, to you too, and on the place you're on, and extend a deep, deep, deep respects to the elders or whatever title they refer to themselves on those particular lands as well. So thank you so much for allowing me to do that. It's so unbelievably important to me, and I feel very deep, I guess, appreciation and gratitude to have the opportunity to be able to deliver that acknowledgement. So for those of you listening, my name is Louise O Reilly, and I am an inclusion and diversity coach. It is something I'm really, really passionate about. Exclusion and racism and colorism and lots of different biases based on physical traits is something that I have experienced throughout my entire life. And it is something that had been really quite traumatic to me, starting from quite a young age, really seeing how the way people looked determined how they were treated differently in our society. And it's something I picked up very early on. Also, this concept of identity was, I feel like it was kind of forced on me at a very early age to decide what my identity was in a space where I just was just me. I was just Louise. And the fact that you had to put yourself into particular boxes was really quite confusing. And having adults in particular push their own belief systems about what identity really means onto a young child was really actually quite traumatic for me. In the spaces that I was in, I identify as Aboriginal, and I have always identified as Aboriginal. However, I don't disown my Scandinavian heritage that I have, which is quite a large part of my heritage that I have, or any other heritage that I have that make up me, because it's all beautiful. However, the Aboriginal culture is something that absolutely sings to my heart, and that's how I identify. I identify as Black, so that's BLAK, and although I have white skin, so it's not actually linked with color, it's about your own spirituality and how you identify and what kind of culture you connect to. What I do in my business, having all that experience growing up and seeing the discrimination happening, seeing the segregation happening, seeing how people were treated differently because the way they looked. And me, myself, I felt like I didn't belong in any space because I identified as Aboriginal. And I don't know where your listeners come from, but racism is a very real and prevalent thing in Australia. And the constant messaging that Aboriginal people are bad, are wrong, or painted with all these really quite negative traits across an entire community, which is really logically impossible for everyone to have those exact same traits in a whole population of people. It really made me feel like I was bad, I was wrong, I did not belong, I was not welcome, and I was not wanted. And so that inner dialogue really affected me to the point where I was contemplating my own existence in life and in the universe, because this was my home. This is my birth country. This is where my people are from, yet I'm not welcomed. So it really made me look really deeply about this whole concept of being included and valuing diversity, and not just diversity in terms of let's tick off a box for quotas' sake for businesses and things like that. I mean real diversity where we can understand that people are different and all those differences are loved too. And so I created this business. It's been a long time coming, but I help small business owners to understand how they as individuals and in their individual businesses that are so unbelievably unique to them and how they express themselves, how they can be more inclusive, be more accessible to wider groups of people, and how they can support that equality and equity and creating that more inclusive world that they are drawn to. Their soul draws them to want to create. That's kind of what I do.
Wow, I'm blown away. I really am. I just want to take a pause for our listeners to take that in. And I also want to thank you for coming to talk to us, because I consider it a privilege, an absolute privilege. And I want to say,
as do I.
I want to say one of the
As do
things that has
I.
drawn to me is that you have such a gentle and loving energy. And and I'm making an assumption here, so please stop me if I'm wrong, but you know that the best way to approach people to make a change is to approach with that attitude of listening and respect, even to those people who are not aware of how they create division, how they create exclusion. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. We are all products of what we have been brought up to believe and understand. We're very social beings. So we constantly are looking and seeking for belonging and wanting to belong to community. And so if you see everyone around you behaving in certain ways towards certain people, it really does stimulate something in your mind to go, if I don't behave in that same manner, in that same way, maybe I won't belong. maybe I won't be accepted. And that's really quite a massive threat to a lot of people, especially people who have felt, you know, who do feel abandonment, who do really, rejection is really a big part of them, and it's a big trauma for them. It can be really quite severe to even contemplate going against what the rest of the society or their community are doing. So it's understanding, it's listening with a compassion, because feeling distanced or divided or different from other people is actually quite a trauma in itself. That's not something our soul naturally wants to do. So I feel if I can come into that space with compassion, that there is a reason you're doing the things you're doing. And I don't believe that anyone tries to hurt people intentionally. That's certainly something that your soul doesn't want. So I come into it going, okay, let's listen to the stories that have brought you to this particular spot. And now let's try and really unpack what you've experienced. Let's look at why you're thinking the way you're thinking. Let's look at some of your biases. Let's explore your privilege so you can understand where you fit into this whole thing. And then we can look at why you're actually here. Why is inclusion, diversity important to you? I mean, if you are listening to this right now, there's a reason you're listening to this right now. There is no coincidences in the universe. And this is something you're calling to yourself because it's something that you want to expand on within you. And really, it's about psychology of it as well. If you're going and saying, well, if you're doing all these different things that aren't inclusive, and I'm going, well, that's bad and that's wrong and you should change your behavior, automatically you're going to get, you know, your defense mechanism is going to jump into place, and you're going to be going into the fight, flight, freeze, or appease kind of situation. You don't have the capacity for reasoning. You don't have the capacity to really understand the words that I'm saying and the impacts that it's having in the world. But also, you're probably not inclined to continue a conversation with me because it's unpleasant. If we can engage in really respectful conversations where, you know, we can actually walk away and not agree, that's okay to not agree with things. But I would like to think that when I have conversations and people listen to me, that they can go away and they can contemplate those conversations, and they can explore within themselves how they feel about each of those different topics. And then I would be open enough for them to come back and go, you know, that conversation that you had the other day, or we had the other day, can we just talk about that a little bit more? Because I've had time to think about it and I want to chat about this new concept that I've thought about. And that's social movement in itself. That's how we're going to change the world, with respectful conversations where we're both interested in listening to what the other is saying and not needing to feel like we need to win, and not needing to feel like we need to convince anyone of anything. It's about the alignment that's going on within self. Does this feel aligned to me? If it doesn't, what's going on and how can I make it feel aligned to me?
Wow. And I love the fact that it's about listening, active listening. And that's definitely not something that's been taught to us in school. I remember training in listening skills because I wanted to be a counselor. So I trained for a whole year just on the art of listening. And everybody had told me I was a good listener, but I wasn't. When I did this course, I realized absolutely not, because I was listening with the intent to respond. So the whole time I was holding in my head, I want to say this, and I want to say this, and I want to say this, but I wasn't really listening. So I think it's important that we plant the seeds in our audience about the magical power of deep listening.
Yep, absolutely. We have on Noongar country here, I was introduced to a new term a couple of years ago, and one of the elders, and it's called Dani. So it's your tongue is listening. And it's where you are not interested in coming up with those responses or having a new statement to put out or finding the facts about anything. It's about actually deeply taking in the whole essence of what the person is and what the person is saying, taking it with and actually contemplating it before you respond to that thing. Because otherwise it's just like a brick wall, and there's two brick walls talking to two brick walls. When we can evolve and grow together is when we can take on each other's and really respect each other's points of view and experiences and our input, and then critically think about it within ourselves. Does this align with me? How do I feel about this thing? And being open to changing your beliefs about those particular things and the way you're talking. Being open to going, I don't have the answers to everything, but I'm doing and speaking my truth, and my truth can change depending on the quality of the conversation that we're having. And it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to change those things. And that's also something we're taught in our society, that, you know, once you say something, you can never change from that. And it's seen like, oh, well, you're just always changing your mind, or you're flip-flopping, which is something we say in Australia. And it's not at all. It's understanding that I now have new knowledge. I now have new wisdom that was shared with me, and new experiences that were shared with me. And now I can make a better decision because I have greater capacity for making a better decision for myself and my own alignment with what is truth in these spaces.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this is beautiful, because it will help people who maybe have had very strong ideas about things, allowing themselves to open their minds and not feel that their ego is threatened by this this journey that they might go on. Because I love that you say that, you know, inclusion and diversity requires us to have uncomfortable conversations. And we all know how much people avoid uncomfortable conversations in all area of life, right? All areas, not just what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
And it's about having the emotional intelligence to go in and say, how is this making me feel? What are the thoughts that are coming up? And because you become more aware of the thoughts that are within you, that have probably been planted by people who have raised you, people you've heard, you know, the things on the TV that goes straight in when you're little, under 7 years old, everything goes straight in. So you can be conditioned to be, you know, racist. Absolutely. Actually, no child is born racist. I'm pretty sure that's a fact. So, but then I love that you mentioned the fact that, yeah, but if I depart, and that's what I've done, because I come from actually a quite racist family on my mother's side, and I've had to depart from them. And now I'm not even in touch with them, which is a little bit sad, but there's also the physical distance because we're in different countries, so that makes it easier. And that might not be a coincidence, actually, that I moved away from France, because it allowed me to rebirth myself and to be me. But yes, it's important to have those conversations. What I love
with yourself
sorry,
as
go ahead.
well. And it's with yourself as well. But the thing is, what I really want to share with your audience is that we're not the saviors for anyone. We're not here to save anyone else. We're not here to do any of that kind of stuff. We are here to be ourselves in the full expression of ourselves. And we know within ourselves when something doesn't feel right. When you see racism playing out, when you see any kind of discrimination playing out and you feel uncomfortable about it, you know within yourself that doesn't align to you. So you don't have to be going out and purposely having these uncomfortable conversations with people, because there are all types of leaders in the world. There are all types of leaderships, and we can change and have social movements and innovate a more inclusive world in many different ways. And so it's important to understand who you are how you identify, what your privilege is, and what your mission is, how you want to actually be showing up in the world. Because when you understand those concepts of yourself, you will know how you fit into the conversation, or you'll know how you fit into the movement and the creation of that more inclusive world. And sometimes it's big and loud and bold. Sometimes that's what people are called to do. But other times it can be soft, and it can be gentle, and it might be a process of being. It could be a process, how you influence and change the world is by you changing your particular behaviors, changing the way you use your language, or changing the I don't know, the businesses that you buy from, or you decide to donate to certain charities. That is social change in itself, because if one single person decides that they are going to behave in a different way socially because of the belief that they want a more inclusive world, and they are going to be the participant in that inclusive world, that's social change right there. Just a single person.
It's the ripple effect, isn't it? And it all starts within.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Now,
absolutely.
I hope you're okay for me to mention something about racism in my family and intuition, because that's actually a very powerful story, but I want to hear your story as well. And I'm sure you have many, but I hope you've thought of one within your business that you can share with us, because that's a little bit the theme of these interviews. But I remember as a child, whenever I heard something racist, it didn't feel right. It just didn't feel right. And I just couldn't buy into it. It just couldn't. And I stood up. I remember having arguments with my mum about her racism and whatever she was saying that I knew was trash. It was just complete trash. And I feel grateful to that younger self for knowing and trusting her inner wisdom, because a lot of my cousins and relatives were conditioned into it, but my intuition stopped me from being conditioned. It never went under my skin. And I want to extend some compassion though for the people who have been conditioned, because I just explored this week my human design, and I knew nothing about it. It's but apparently there's something in my human design that protects me from being indoctrinated. And I was like, that makes sense now. That makes sense. I came equipped with this, but it also made me realize that some people might not have come equipped with this. And I think it's expanded my compassion for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, it absolutely does. And it can be quite hard, because whenever people are expressing they're being racist, or they're discriminating based on some kind of trait that a particular group has, there is anger there is fear it's not good feelings. So they're expressing this uncomfortable, not good feelings of their self. That's a horrible space to be in. Whereas when you are loving and accepting of all people, of all shapes, colors, races, ethnicities, sizes, hair colors, whatever it is, when you're just like, I'm a person and they are a person, and I'm valuable and they're valuable, and we're all loved and cherished and accepted, that's a great feeling. That's a great space to be in. And that's a beautiful energy to have. There is no threat that you can feel from that. We are just people, and we're essentially brothers, sisters, siblings on this planet, and we're all here to do what we're meant to do and express ourselves in our unique individual ways. And so there is such a power and a beauty in that. In terms of the racism that I experienced, certainly racism there was quite a lot of racism in my family. unfortunately, and it was really quite upsetting and hard to live with, because I do know that my family loved me. Like, people who did participate in that, they absolutely loved me and they loved my family, my siblings and things like that. But I also understood that they had no idea what they were actually doing. And I believe they believe they're good people and that their behaviors aren't actually causing harm. And I guess they convince themselves that it's just a joke, or it's not a bad thing to do, or it's okay to behave in that way. And there's just no understanding that it's not. It doesn't excuse the behaviors that they do from a societal point of view, but it does make it very difficult to try and navigate when you are in close relationships and you have that love, that deep care and love and connection with each other. But there is that discrimination that is happening, that racism that's happening. And even though it's not directly at you, it's at a group of people who you identify with, your own community that you identify. It can be really hard to handle and deal with, for sure.
I remember one of my cousins telling me, I'm not racist because she's married to a Vietnamese man. And I said, that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't
No.
mean anything, because she was very, very racist, but she couldn't see it. She's completely blind. Completely blind. I'm not
Yeah.
racist because I have a black friend. That doesn't mean
Yeah.
anything.
No, does not mean a single thing. And people say, I'm not racist, my family comes in all colors, or I'm not racist, I have Aboriginal children, or I'm not racist. No one outside of yourself is your hall pass ticket to racism, or you not being responsible for your words or your actions that you take. So I think really deep self-exploration around how you feel about these particular topics. And you can explore all the different types of discrimination. You can look at, ableism, sexism, genderism, classism, colorism, all the isms that there are. You can have a look and go, well, how do I actually feel about this thing? How would I feel about a person who is in that community approaching me or talking to me? And just really explore how it sits in you, whether that would be a comfortable experience for you or not. And then going, well, why isn't it? Why isn't that the comfortable experience for me? Something that I talk to my clients about is quite often when we have uncomfortable experiences with people who look differently to us. So it's not necessarily who they are, but they just physically look differently and identify differently than us. Sometimes that the uncomfortableness that they experience within their body is associated with fear and danger and caution. And I say to them that often that uncomfortableness is not to fear and be scared of or anything like that. It's actually the other end of the scale. It's the end of the scale where your soul is sad that you feel disconnected from that person. That's actually longing for connection. So it's uncomfortable because you aren't in alignment with the connection and love and respect and valuing of that other human being. So it's quite the opposite of fear. It's that there is not enough love in that space.
Wow. Yeah, I can see that, because your soul can see that your personality is not aligned with it.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting into the whole spirituality thing here, aren't we?
Yes, yes. And it's directly linked with, energy. It's directly linked with intuition. It's directly connected with self, which in essence is your spirituality. Yourself is your spirituality.
Absolutely.
And listening to that intuition on what's going on can be a great teacher and leader for you when you know you get that trigger, this doesn't feel right, this doesn't seem right. But sometimes that rightness, explore both the ends of the scale. Is it a fear thing, or is it that there needs to be more love in this? And it's all about the energetics. We're all just energy. We're all just energy. And knowing that, and knowing that each of us actually contributes to our global consciousness, our own expansion of humanity and the universe, knowing that we're all actually part of the same team. We're all here living
Team
out our
human.
experiences so we can all benefit.
I hope you don't mind me saying, but I've always said I'm a citizen of the world. And I stick by it. And I've never really felt that much connection to being French, although I know this culture has influenced me a lot. But for me, it's always been my motto. I'm a citizen of the world. Don't try and pull me into one or the other. But then at the same time, I can see that that's sort of the unifying aspect. So how do you allow the unifying aspect with also the very individual and diverse aspect?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Yeah, that is such an interesting question. I think it's really important to understand how you identify, because your identity is so critically important to how you do show up in the world, how you express yourself in the world, and what you create in the world. So I think a good question to ask yourself is around why you're doing that. If that particular thing is actually stripping back of other people or anything else, or causing any kind of harm, then you can reassess that. Or is the reason that you're doing that particular thing is because you actually feel genuine connection to all the people of the planet? So it's like asking, are you doing it to make a point or to prove something to others that you are a good human or that you're accepting, or are you doing it because that's actually how you identify and you feel that's important for you to identify as? I was only just on a call earlier, doing a coaching call for my members, and I was saying the thing is, borders and countries and all that kind of stuff is man-made. Because we're actually talking about immigrants and migrants and things like that. And we're actually one landmass. The whole world, we're just one landmass. We just happen to have deeper parts where water fills in. And we're living to these constructs. So being French is a construct, being Australian is a construct, even being Aboriginal is a construct. But what are constructs that we align with that are inclusive or supporting and growing us together as a humanity? And what are the constructs that are actually quite limiting to us and dividing us and separating us so that we're feeling disconnected from each other? Those ones that are quite limiting, can we drop them away? Can we allow them to, they have been, and can we now allow them to fall away and be part of our past experience, and then move into more connected experiences and move into that future vision of what we actually want to be creating in the world? And this is what's really, really important for us to understand within ourselves, is to have that vision of what we actually want to be creating in the future, what kind of world we want to be contributing to, or what we want to create, because we each are the creators of that future vision. So if we don't like what we're experiencing right now, but we're continuing to choose to live the same way and follow those same social constructs and live within those same limited ideologies and paradigms where we are being separated, you're actually participating in its continuance. So there's no sidelines to this. We are each participants as individuals in this new creation. Or do you want to dream up something, a world that's so beautiful, where when you just think about it, it just lights you up, where every single person is loved and accepted exactly how they are, and you can wear what you want to wear, and you can have your hair the way you want to wear your hair, whatever it is will be accepted. How you want to identify is okay. How you think, how you process things is okay. Wouldn't that be such a wonderful world where you're not constantly putting on a mask and trying to perform for others and trying to conform to the way society is meant to, and it's in quotation mark, meant to be? We break down this privileged system and we don't have this concept of an ideal human anymore. It's just we're all ideal humans because we exist. And then if we can work to that and go, well, what can I do? What's one little thing I can do today to get towards that new vision? And then the next day, what's one little thing I can do today to get closer to that thing? And then we can be actively participating in the new creation of that beautiful world. Because there are so many people suffering and they want that new world. Too often we're looking backwards and going, look what has happened, look what has happened, look what has happened. And then the other side of the coin is look what's happening now, look what's happening now. But there are not enough people looking forward to going, well, what do we actually want to create? How are we innovating this? How are we taking and acknowledging what has been, what is, and then deciding to do it differently for the future? How are we being those leaders for future generations? How are we going to leave this world? How are we going to leave a legacy for our future generations? And how are we role modeling that critical thinking and connection to deep self and spirituality for them to create something even better than we created?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I could talk to you for hours, right? And I'm not saying this because we're about to stop the podcast, but I think I could listen to you actually for hours, not talk, listen. I've been reflecting because I'm working with you on where all my motivation comes from around this whole inclusivity and diversity piece. And of course, it touches me deeply in places that are very personal to me. But I'm hoping that it's going to plant a seed for our audience, and that is going to give them permission to be completely themselves. I love that you talk about masks because from where I come from, I'm unraveling my identity as an autistic woman and embracing it and owning it. And I had never even imagined how many ripple effects it would have in my own life, in my own identity, in how I feel and how I look at things, and how, you know, even before I talked to you this morning, well, it's evening for you, I was researching top tips to network as an autistic person. And I didn't find anything that resonated with me. There is, and it was probably written by non-autistic people. And some of the stuff that was written just didn't even spark me. It just meant nothing.
Yeah.
And of course, that led me to think, because I actually woke up with an idea to write an article 5 days ago, my top tips for autistic people to network, business network.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was expecting to find that out there, and it's not. So here we go. We go back to intuition. We go back also to deeply connecting. And I love the fact that you have a multiple heritage, but you've chosen to identify with a part of it. And I still stand by the fact that I say I'm a citizen of the world, because that's something that resonates deeply with me. And it's not something that I want to placate on anyone else. As you said, I don't feel superior because of it. It's just who I am. And it's something that was validated. I want to go back to you though, so because you speak things, such wisdom, that I want people to just listen to you. But if I can just mention one thing, which I just forgot. No, what was I going to say? No, I'm not going to say it. It might come back later. But it's important to identify with this. Yeah, as you said, you were identifying with your Aborigine heritage, and that's what matters. Nothing else matters. It's your choice that's at the center of what is going to happen from now on. And other people have to respect that. It's not their story, it's yours. So for me, I'm not officially diagnosed as an autistic person, but it doesn't matter. Even though at the start of my journey of identifying, that was a biggie. I was like, how can I claim to be autistic if I don't have a stamp of approval from someone else?
Yeah, absolutely. And who created those checklists that defined you in that group? Do they actually experience that themselves? And this is one really, really important thing to talk about. But before I move on, I do want to mention that we don't use Aborigine here anymore.
Oh,
that's an older term that can kind of
Okay.
No, it is fine, and it's a beautiful opportunity for learning. And there's a reason you said it. That's like an older term that have been used to explain Aboriginal people, describe Aboriginal people, and we don't use that anymore. It's quite often seen as a little bit offensive to do it, and it's because it's linked with lots of old policies that tried to essentially wipe us all out, in genocide. But other than that, one really important thing to remember is the systems that we're currently experiencing in our societies, in our Western societies, who created all those systems? I doubt that anyone would have gone out and gone, okay, I'm going to find people who belong to the autistic community and get them together and get them to tell us what it means to be defined as autistic, and then do it that way. It's people looking who don't even belong to that particular group, and what would it be called? Observing, guessing what it means to be autistic, how it feels to be autistic, what that autistic person goes through or experiences. And it's the same thing with things like history. Whoever writes history are the people who are the most dominant culture. They are usually the victors. They're usually the colonizers of those spaces. So you don't ever know what the true history is, because it's always written in a way to make it seem like those victors are the good people, and the other people are the other. The other people are the bad, and that the people who went and colonized or went and took over a new place, they're the saviors, and they were doing it for all good causes, and they're going to save humanity, or they're going to save these people. And that's just not the case at all. It's every system that we're currently living in, and this is like the policing system, this is our health system, this is even things down to our road system and our housing systems. They were created by people who are of massive privilege, who get to decide how that system works for everyone else. People who are in marginalized communities usually aren't invited to the table to have the conversation, to actually speak from experience. What are the best things for those groups of people? What are the solutions that they require? What is the accessibility? What are the thoughts that they go through? What are the needs that they have? They're not even invited to the conversation. And that's part of the big problem, because you have a whole society with people who identify very, very differently, yet the whole community is built for a specific type of person in mind. And so a lot of people are falling through the cracks, who are unsupported, who are essentially, forgotten about. and made to feel unwelcome, like they don't belong, because they don't actually fit into the systems we create that have been created, but we can. And so if you have any form of influence, you have any form of affluence, you essentially have a great responsibility, if you choose to, that is, great responsibility to start having the conversations, saying, let's invite these people to have chats. Let's look at how we can innovate. Like, innovation is a beautiful thing. We want to continuously evolve and grow and innovate everything we have to make better and better. But the people with who are closest to the solutions to all the social issues we have in our world are the people who have experienced it firsthand. They are the people who are the closest to those solutions. So for anyone who jumps in and goes, well, I'm just going to speak on behalf of these people without being part of that particular group, it's very foolish, very foolish.
Mm. You're so right. And that's where systemic racism comes from, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're completely blind to it. We're blind.
It's systemic oppression all round. It's, oppression of women, oppression of people with color, oppression of people with disability, oppression of people with neurodivergence. It's all of those things, because those communities aren't valued to the point where they're invited to the table and their input is valued enough to be part of the entire process, from the very starting, the conception of the ideas of our systems we have in place, all the way through to the completion.
Yeah, I have two wonderful friends who have helped me on this journey tremendously. And one of them is a prominent, I'd say, thinker in terms of the rights of minorities. And she had been recruited, and I'm not going to give any names because that's not important, by a big organization here in the UK to look at these aspects. And yet the whole committee was white, and she wasn't given much of it. Everything that she suggested was discarded. And ultimately, it was a white person that was making the decision. So the whole inclusivity exercise was, one of those paper ticking box kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a tokenistic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it's
she was telling me,
the fact that you're here means that we're doing a good job.
Yeah, exactly. And she opened my eyes to the fact that, health, people are not treated the same by doctors and by the system, depending on their skin color. And that just they're not even given the same amount of painkillers. Like it blows your mind when you start opening your eyes. It's a bit like the pill in the Matrix. You can't go back, right?
No, you can't.
And it astounds you. And I've had my share as well of exploring the mental health arena, and I just cannot look at it the same way either. And the discrimination is just, I wouldn't say mind-blowing, but mind-blowing for me is more of a positive thing. Whereas what I've seen is just horrendous. Horrendous.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, there's more marginalized people that have to deal.
It's like a whole new awakening.
Yeah.
It's like a whole new awakening where it's like there's a social awakening where you start to see beyond what you've seen before. You start to recognize different cues and different treatments of different people because of the way they look or how they identify. And it's absolutely, once your eyes are open to it, you can't not see it anymore. And you probably will see more and more of it. And, the fact that you do see it is probably an indication from your intuition that you're ready to see it. And you're ready to start making those decisions and doing that soul searching yourself and doing the listening to those marginalized groups about the experiences that they're going through, really deeply listening, and then asking yourself, okay, from what they have said and what they have asked of me, what can I now do? What do I have the capacity to do? How can I alter or change my behavior? Or how can I bring up the conversation or influence the concept of inclusion and diversity in these new spaces?
So I'd like to deepen our conversation about what deep listening is about to help our privileged friends listening. Because you said, what can I do? And I feel that immediately for me is I need to ask marginalized groups, what can we do? What do they want us to do? Not what I can do, what I think should be done. Does that, yeah? It's an important one, isn't it?
Yes, it's vital to being an ally, or I often say an associate, because ally implies that there is some kind of war or fight, and there's not. It's just people being people. And so if we can be associates and work together on these things, it's very important to listen. So the very first thing you can do is just have a look at, what's the type of content that you're consuming? Who are the people that you're listening to? Are they diverse? Do they belong to, marginalized groups? And just start seeking out people who are in marginalized groups, they're the same value systems as you. And actually listen to them. What are they saying? What are they saying? The experiences that they've got, what they're going through, and listen to what they require of allies or associates to do, of supporters to do. And because, like I said, they are the ones closest to the problems, so they're the ones closest to the solutions. We're not saviors, and we can't guess what is the best thing to do in those situations. They can feel it and know it, with all the complexities that make up them and all the complexities and how they fit into the society. Like I said, it's quite foolish to presume that you have the answers if you've never experienced those particular things. A smart person knows when to listen. A smart person knows when they are not the expert in their field, and they can listen to the expert and decide within themselves whether they're going to take those actions or not, whether they actually align with that person. And also understanding that in any marginalized group, there is going to be a difference of opinions. There's going to be some people that are far on this side, and then other people are going to be far on the other side, and they don't agree. And that's okay to not agree. We're all individuals in every single group, and we bring our own experiences, our own belief systems, our own values, and what we want to be creating in the world. We bring all of us to those things. But if you can find people who are or belong to marginalized groups who align with your type of energy, you feel like you connect with them, just sit and listen to them and really, really soak in the essence of who they are and what they want to bring about in the world, and become a team with them, become a team and create this new, beautiful, inclusive world alongside them or behind them. Both is perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So what would be your top 3 tips, if you have any, for someone who wants to start the journey of making their businesses more inclusive?
Okay. The very first thing I think is really important, and I've only really just started concreting it in this week actually, is that there needs to be a commitment to self, to doing the work on themselves, to really uncovering what their own biases are, looking at what their privilege is, looking at the types of culture that they exist in their society. Because even among different towns in the same country, there's different cultures in those different things. So actually really having a deep understanding of that, having a look at your own heritage and how you identify, having a look at your own value system and what's really, really important to you as a person. And then after that commitment, so that would be number one, to really look at self, really, really understand self. And also part of that is, what do you actually want to be creating in the world? What vision do you have for the future? What vision of an inclusive world do you want to be creating? Having that and holding that. The next thing I would suggest is really searching out and seeking people in those marginalized groups to deeply listen to. Listen to them, follow them, absorb their content, listen to their experiences, listen to their potential solutions to problems. So it's self, it's listening, and then it would be taking action, really committing to taking some form of action in your business or within yourself. You know, it might be, I'm committing to no longer using this form of language or this type of language. And it might be like gendered language. So I'm going to do my best to use non-gendered language when I address people. Okay, now I'm going to make sure I'm supporting some of the disability community. So I'm going to add captions to my videos or transcriptions. I'm going to increase the size of the letters on things, or have that function where they can have more like that. I'm going to look at my building spaces. Can a wheelchair fit into these spaces? Where am I actually advertising? Am I just advertising to spaces where people will look like me, or am I actually going into spaces and giving opportunity for people to work with me and accept my goods and services because they need what I have, but I'm not actually present in those communities? Looking at those kinds of things. So it's just about and it's little actions. It doesn't have to be big actions. In business, there's lots of stuff to do. So if you can just do one baby step at a time, that's already improvement. That's already becoming more inclusive. And with that, I would say, be very mindful not to position yourself as an expert. Just allow yourself to go along the journey and be a student along that journey. And it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to get things wrong. If you have a beautiful intention of being inclusive and accepting and loving of other people, and you know how to apologize effectively from your heart, like meaningfully apologize when you do make mistakes and commit to altering your behavior, there's not much more we can ask, really, is there? Without the action, and that's the part that people get stuck on, without the action, there is no change. The intention and the energy of it doesn't change it alone. That's why we are the creators. We create it in the energy, we create it with our visions, but we also have everything that we have to make sure it transitions into the 3D physical world as well.
Absolutely. Now, I'd like you to tell our audience where they can find you, but specifically if they were interested to join your membership, how can they join?
Oh, that is a good question. I don't even know the link to that one. But you can find me on.
I'll add it to the notes. Yeah, we'll do that.
Beautiful, beautiful. So your audience can find me at louiseoreilly.com.au. That's where you'll find all my stuff. I do have a membership, as Angie's suggested. It is a very high touch membership where every single week we are working on something. Although, and Ange could probably let you know, I hope it's not overwhelming. There's not lots and lots and lots of information, and there's not lots of pressure to do lots of things. It's about the baby steps and really understanding who you are and who your business is, and really working out how I can take the actions to express that in the real world And it is very, very, very much about aligning to self.
I absolutely love your membership. I would highly recommend it to anyone who wants to start on this journey. I find it a very nurturing space, a very supportive space. And I mean, just like I'm sure people listening to this episode will know the true you from your wisdom. You pour wisdom out of you like a fountain. Beautiful. It's just I could listen to you for
It's
hours,
the
as I said.
intuition. It's the intuition. The energy, the intuition, the connection to the universe, connection to my ancestors, connection to the land and the nature and the environment is integral to what I do. And I do a lot of these interviews, and they're completely unscripted. And I often come in, I don't even know what the questions are that are asked, because I know that I'm completely, wholly supported by the universe, and whatever is needed to be said in those moments will come to me and will be delivered to me to share. And quite often, some of those things seem so unusual to bring up, but I get prompted to talk about unusual things sometimes. And later on, I find out it's the perfect thing that was said. It actually deeply resonates with the particular audience, or they had just had a conversation about it earlier, so it made sense. So sometimes when I do, especially with my coaching, I will say something, I go, you know, I'm being prompted to say something about this particular thing. I don't even know what it's linked with, but I'll tell you about it. And it's just been, it's a pillar. It's absolutely a major foundational pillar in my business, is my intuition.
One more thing before we say goodbye to our audience. You highlighted the word Aborigine as something offensive. So what word would you prefer us to use?
So this is probably going to be a constantly evolving thing. Nothing is ever fixed in terms of language. When language is fixed, that's when the language is dead. So at the moment, the preference is for, there are a couple of preferences. So First Nations is a preference, Aboriginal is a preference. But one thing that the different countries and so for those unfamiliar with Aboriginal people and culture in Australia, we actually have many, many countries in Australia, and it's not recognised in the Western system or in the Western map, but we have hundreds of countries. And the way that most people like to be identified is actually by their country. So my countries are Warawa country and Noongar country. And in Noongar country, so that's the whole nation in itself, I belong to the Baladong people of the Noongar nation. So they like it that way as well. But like I said, it does change. The best thing you can do is actually talk to the people and ask them, how do you prefer to identify? What works for you? Because it can be different for all different people. And I by no means speak on behalf of Aboriginal people at all. I speak on behalf of myself. And I am sharing observations I've had in the community around these particular conversations.
Okay. Thank you so much, Louise. It's been a pleasure for me, and I'm sure for our listeners too. And I want to thank the listeners if they've got to the end of this conversation. I'm sure they have. It's so fascinating. And I'll see you, everyone, next week. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.